On page 12 of section 2.3, we're going to get practice with those graphing techniques we learned on the other page. So if you look back at the box at the bottom, it says first you graph your y-intercept. So as we're looking here, we go, okay, y-intercept. On the y-axis, every point on the y-axis has x0. 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. That's how we know to put the 0 in, because that's what y-intercept is. Where does the graph cross the y-axis? And then we learned on the other page that this number here, we call it the constant because it doesn't have a variable with it, is where it crosses the y-axis at 3. So 0, 3 is going to be our first point. From that point, we do our slope, which whenever we're using a graph, we call rise over run. And I always write the words because, as I told you from grading a lot of tests in my life, I've noticed that students get these mixed up. They run first and then rise. If you write it down, you probably won't mix it up. And remember, it's alphabetic order. RI comes before RU. So it's rise over run. And that's the slope, which is always what's in front of the x. Don't include the x. It's what's in front of the x, which is 1 over 2. So then we plot the point 0, 3, which the other side of the graph told us to do first, or the other side of the page 11. And from that point, we rise 1 and run 2. So rise 1, run 2, make a point. Rise 1, run 2, make a point. Rise 1, run 2, make a point. And you can do as many points as you want. Like I said, when I give a test, I ask you to make at least 3. So you should always practice doing at least 3. And then, as I said, part of the points on a paper pencil test are using a straight edge. So you should get out your straight edge, use that. And then the last point comes from putting arrows on both ends, because lines do go on indefinitely in both directions. Unless sometimes you have a word problem where that might not be the case. But these are not word problems. They're just simply graphing a line. So that is what I would want to see on a paper pencil test for full credit. And when I collect the work for your electronic tests, this is what I would like to see on them as well. Okay, so number 5 is not quite as easy. Can you see why? This one is in y equals mx plus b form. Is this one in y equals mx plus b form? No, it's not. But we learned on the previous page that it's pretty easy to make it. It takes a little bit of work, but not hard to do it. So what we want to do is get y alone, using all the techniques we learned on the first day's lesson about solving an equation. So if I want to get y alone, I need to do the opposite of everything around it to start isolating. So I always cover up the y because that's what I don't want to move. And I go, oh, well, what's the opposite of add 3x? Oh, that would be subtract 3x. And then when we were doing this one on the other page, I said, don't put it under the 10. It's not a like term, so don't write it under 10. Write it out to the side so you don't accidentally try to subtract those, because we can only add and subtract like terms. Then the other hint I gave you on the last page was when you're solving for y, you want to make sure that you make it y equals mx plus b. So you want to move this up front. And what's important is that you take the signs with it. So this would be negative 3x and positive 10. And y still not quite alone. Still have a little bit of work. This is y times 5. So just like we did on the last page, you need to divide by 5, which is the opposite of times 5. And now you can see 5 divided by 5 is 1. we finally have our y alone. Now it's 1y or just y. We have one negative, so that's going to stay negative, so negative 3/5 x. And remember what I said, anytime you have a negative with the fraction, make sure it's in the numerator. Don't put it in the denominator. Slope doesn't like it in the denominator, and our calculators don't like it. So you just move it up to the numerator. And then plus 10 divided by 5 is 2. So now my problem's in exactly the form I want. Y equals mx plus b. So now I can easily see my y-intercept. Remember with the y-intercept, x is always 0, 0, 2. My rise over run is always what's in front of the x. It's the m. Y equals mx plus b, and it's negative 3 over positive 5. So once you get it solved for y, then it's just like all the others. But as you can see, there's a couple steps you have to do in the beginning. You could never tell what the slope is or the y-intercept in this form. This is called standard form, by the way. Ax plus by equals c. So this is the form we need for graphing. So just like on the last problem, we plot the y-intercept first, so 0, 2. But here's where the change occurs. This one has a rise of negative 3. That means we're going down 3, but this is what a lot of students get confused. Just because the numerator's negative doesn't mean the denominator's negative. It's positive. So what I tell students to help them remember is you always run forward or you'll trip. So my run will always be positive, so I always run forward or I'll trip. So my rise of negative 3 means go down 3, but then I run forward 5 so I don't trip. So down 3, run forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down 1, 2, 3, run forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's my 3 points that are required. And like I said, if you run out of room, you can always go backwards, just do the opposite. The opposite of down 3 would be up 3. The opposite of right 5 would be left 5. So up 3, left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can always go backwards too. But first I go forward and make sure I have the pattern down. Down 3, right 5, down 3, right 5. Then I can go backwards. So now I have a nice, perfect line. And you can always tell if you're on track because, of course, the points should all be in a nice straight line. Anytime your equation is y equals mx plus b, it will be an absolutely perfectly straight line that goes on forever in both directions. Okay, it's your turn. So let's see you work on the next one. Couple reminders. Remember, if there's nothing behind, that's plus 0. And x's coefficient is 1, which would be 1 over 1. So that's a couple hints before you start. So go ahead and do that one. Shut off the video and then check back, and you can check it with me. Okay, when I go to do 6, this is how I'm going to write it. Y equals x plus 0, so I want that number out there. But I also want a number in front of x because that's my slope. So every coefficient without a number has a 1 in front. Just like any blank spot can always be filled in with a 0. And because I want slope to be rise over run, I'm going to even go a step further and go, okay, I know that's y equals 1x, but 1 is really 1 over 1. And then that will help me with the graphing because you would not believe how many students just get stumped on this. I have no idea. And it's because they don't know that this is x is the same thing as x plus 0. And x's coefficient is 1, which is really 1 over 1. So it's like it's too simple. They can't get it. So now that we have it written in the right form, we're ready to go. So the y-intercept x is always 0, and it's a point. 0, comma, b is 0. And my slope, which is my rise over run, is 1 over 1. And we're ready to graph. So plot the point 0, 0, which is the origin. And the slope is positive, so rise 1, run 1, rise 1, run 1, rise 1, run 1, and I could just go on forever, but I won't. And so there is the slope of 1. This is important coming up in our class in Chapter 8 because we're going to learn that this is the line of symmetry for inverse functions. They're going to be symmetric about the line y equals x, which is just the line that bisects the coordinate plane, cuts it in half going from diagonal to diagonal. So it's going to be the line of symmetry for inverse functions. But for right now, all you need to do is be able to graph it. Okay, so let's go ahead and go on to page 13. We have about 4 minutes left, so I think we can get a start on some problems here. Okay, so determine if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And this is page 13 on section 2.3. So before, when we were determining if lines were parallel, perpendicular, or neither, we had 2 points. And we found the slopes of each of the points and compared them. Well, now we have equations. So the rules are still the same. Parallel lines always have the same slope, just like we underlined in the section, I think it was 2.2. Perpendicular lines always have slopes that are different signs and reciprocals. And then if they fit neither of those, we write neither. But, like I said before, students always go, how did you know to find the slope? Well, that's all we really know about parallel and perpendicular lines is about their slope. So for the same reason, when I see this problem, I know step number 1 is solve for y, because I don't know the slope until I get it solved for y. So you have to think, what do I know about parallel and perpendicular? Well, I know about their slopes. Well, how do I find the slope of a line? Oh, I solve for y, and then the slope is what's in front of x. So this one, we already know the slope, so we can write the slope of the first line is 2/7. So in my head, I start thinking of the scenarios. If the slope of this line is 2/7, then I'm going to circle parallel. If the slope of this line is negative 7/2, then I'm going to circle perpendicular. And if it's not 2/7 or negative 7/2, then I'm going to circle neither. So in my head, I'm already ready for all the different cases. So just like on the last 2 pages, if it's not solved for y, you have to do the opposite to get y alone. So the opposite of subtract 2x is add 2x. So we get negative 2x plus 2x is gone. We accomplished our goal. Our y term is now alone. And remember, we want to switch the order here and put it in the proper order. So 7y equals, we want y equals mx plus b. So positive 2x, positive 4. And then last, we want to divide everything by 7. Because the opposite of times 7 is divide by 7. And make sure you hit every term. Otherwise, your slope will be wrong or your y-intercept will be wrong. So there's 3 terms, so you should divide all 3 by 7. So then we get, sorry about that. So then we get y equals 2/7 plus 4/7. So what's the slope? m sub 2 equals 2/7. So look at our two answers.